Today we're jumping into Captain America: Brave New World, big one obviously. It's Anthony Mackie's first time headlining as Cap, and the film really goes into, political stuff, conspiracies, and just the sheer weight of carrying that shield.
Exactly. And our mission today, for you, is really to pull out the key takeaways from how this film's been evaluated. We want to look at what really worked, maybe where it stumbled a bit, and crucially, why that matters for understanding this, significant new chapter in the MCU, especially with that legacy angle.
Okay, let's get right into it then. What did the evaluations say the film got right? What stood out? Well, one thing that comes up again and again in our sources is Anthony Mackie. People seem really impressed.
Oh, definitely. He doesn't just, hold the shield. He seems to genuinely wrestle with what it means. It's a really layered performance, apparently, exploring Sam Wilson's own way of leading, his moral code in this kind of messy post-blip world. It's a real step forward for the character.
Yeah, and I heard the chemistry with Danny Ramirez, Joaquin Torres, that adds something too.
It really does. Adds great energy, some humor. It feels like a natural partnership. And it's quite something how Mackie just is Captain America now. Right. It feels earned.
So Mackie's great, the partnership works. What else landed well?
Well, beyond the performances, the action seems to deliver. You get these pretty entertaining, well-put-together sequences. And the plot, it's got this conspiracy thriller vibe. Do you like Marvel's more political-leaning stuff? There's probably a lot to sink your teeth into there, tension-wise.
Okay.
Even if, maybe the execution overall isn't flawless.
And Harrison Ford, as President Ross, that must add some gravitas.
For sure. Yeah, he brings that sort of seasoned authority, definitely adds another layer to the whole political side of things.
Right, but you mentioned execution wasn't always perfect. That political thriller thing relies heavily on tight plotting, doesn't it? Where did it fall short according to the sources?
Yeah, good point. A common criticism was uneven pacing. And the narrative itself sometimes felt a bit rushed, like certain storylines just didn't get the breathing room or depth you might expect. It could drag in places, apparently, then suddenly speed through key moments.
Inconsistent. And I also picked up that the antagonist wasn't maybe the strongest. How much did that play into things, especially when you think about great Marvel villains?
That's a really critical piece, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, the villains' motivations were often described as underdeveloped. So instead of being a real challenge to Sam's ideals, they kind of felt more like just, a generic obstacle needed for the plot to happen.
A missed opportunity, then, for a film digging into complex themes.
Exactly. And another thing, it seems the film leans pretty heavily on past stuff, like from The Incredible Hulk, Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Oh, right.
Which, look, if you're a hardcore fan, maybe that's rewarding, lots of connections. But for newcomers, it could be a bit confusing, potentially leaving them feeling a bit out of the loop.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, let's talk about something really interesting. The reception. You see this split on Rotten Tomatoes. Audiences are at, 80% positive? Pretty high. But critics, only 53%. That's a big gap. What's going on there?
It is a big gap, and it suggests, different groups are looking for different things, maybe. Critics, it seems, often found it a bit routine, standard Marvel fare, maybe a bit too packed with Easter eggs, lacking that spark the earlier Cap films had.
So competent, but not groundbreaking for them.
Kind of, yeah. And some technical aspects were mentioned, too. Editing feeling choppy sometimes, interrupting the action flow, and maybe some inconsistent CGI, which, can happen with these huge productions, but it pulls you out of the moment.
Right, but audience is still connected.
It seems so. They really responded to Sam Wilson's journey, his character arc, and maybe that more serious, grounded tone resonated with them more than the critics.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the bottom line for you, the listener? Despite the flaws we've talked about, the pacing, the villain, Captain America, Brave New World, still comes across as, a pretty solid MCU entry. Anthony Mackie really steps up, makes the shield his own. It feels like he's earned it. There's enough action, enough character stuff to keep most fans engaged.
I'd agree. It's solid, but arguably it does struggle a bit to completely step out of the shadow of the films before it. And it definitely feels at times more like it's setting things up for the future rather than being in a totally self-contained story.
A setup piece, yeah.
Which brings us back to that audience-critic split. That 80% versus 53%, it really makes you think, doesn't it? What does that huge difference tell us about how we manage expectations for these big franchise entries, especially when they're dealing with legacy characters and clearly building towards what's next? Something interesting for you to chew on.